liberty, and justice for all. Okay, well, I would like to thank the city commissioners and the planning commission to be here this evening, and other staff. Okay.
I'd like to go ahead and call the roll call for the planning commission as well.
Okay. Okay.
Planning commissioners, now I don't know where to start. Grady Bonsall, Dennis Needham, Matt McKenzie, Mary Kumaro, and Wally Henson.
Here. Here. Okay, well, we are here this evening to discuss kind of where we are regarding our information with Community Matters and the work that they have done so far regarding how we feel we may need to have some changes for zoning, regarding housing, and anything else along those lines. So on that, I guess I will pass it over to Barb and Bob.
Yeah, and I'm gonna maybe get Bob, he's in his office, and as long as he's on mute, we're good. So first of all, I wanna thank all of you, one, for taking the time to do the interviews with our staff, and then again, thank you for, answering the worksheets, and thanks Zach and Ken for running the PowerPoint in real time with you guys. It's a great, we had 100% response rate. We also had the construction board fill out the worksheet, but we did not include those results in the tabulations that we did. So what I'd like to do is, Josh, my understanding, you're going to run the PowerPoint. Is that true?
You guys are all still off, by the way.
Yes, he has the PowerPoint up. He's gonna be minimizing the GoToMeeting here in a second.
Perfect.
Okay, the first slide is up.
Okay. So again, the purpose of this meeting is really to see if we can come to some sort of agreement in principle about how you all want to move forward. And I think that both the interviews and the worksheets will help inform that. I will also say that in the interest of time, though most people don't do it this way, if you have questions as we go through this, I think it may be easier for you to just ask the questions as the slide is up if you need any clarification. So next slide. Or can I? Yep. So again, I think the purpose is to come up with some possible housing strategies. So the discussion is informed by the confidential reconnaissance interviews we did with all commissioners and staff. Also an understanding of new growth that is anticipated. Again, as I just said, there's 100% response rate on the worksheets from the commissioners and staff. And what we've been doing in the background is reviewing your current zoning, subdivision, and also your RV park, mobile home park, and campground regulations. And then the other thing we thought would be helpful is to do a quick economic analysis of what one new job is likely to mean in terms of community change. Next slide. So again, yeah, again, the recap of the findings from the interviews with the commissioners and staff is the commissioners generally agreed that more housing units are necessary to accommodate economic growth. Everyone agreed that Goodland needs different types of housing at different prices. Rental housing is also needed. Um, and some housing is needed quickly, and a few people stated by the spring of 2024, which is obviously right around the corner. And the commissioners generally support ADUs, apartments, and modular manufactured homes, except I would add that one person, maybe not the commissioners, was not in favor of modular homes. Next slide. So Bob, I'm going to let you go through this.
Okay, I looked at the census statistics for the town, mostly for 2022, and looked at population, employment, et cetera, and came to that 54% of your population were in prime age group of 20 to 65 years old, which is the prime age. Um, and that I believe it was 77 new houses are needed for 100 new jobs, or 100 households. 100 new jobs will create 67 new households directly, but that there's a multiplier involved. And for a small town like Goodland, the multiplier is somewhere between 1.3 and 1.5. It's very hard to calculate exactly, but it comes out to be about, with the multiplier, one new area job, like in a tire factory or a seed mill, will require net one new house or one new household in Goodland. I say household because you have about a 25% of your population live in single family households, and they obviously don't provide 1.5 job per household. But you have, I'm sorry, what? Yes, expect some.
How are we doing?
Well, unfortunately, I think we're still gonna echo.
Weird. Um, Mike Davenport, suggestion.
as to what we can do regarding
Yeah.
SAP? No, no, I don't have a suggestion. Sorry.
Okay.
It does sound a little better than it was before.
Okay.
Not on our end. Maybe on your end, but not on ours.
Uh, should I try call?
How long is the cable on the phone over here? You know?
Call my cell phone, I don't care. Just pass JJ's phone around. I just leave it on speaker right there, and it's good enough. It's good enough. I got 74.
Never know.
Hey, Ken, what was the contract for?
What's that?
How much was the contract for these guys?
13,000.
13. Thank you. There we go. I can move everything if you want, and you can use that short table. If not, we can put the podium in the middle.
Zipper will catch it. Okay, so the number for this is 758904520.
I think what we might try is have you call in to our conference phone here, and maybe we can just talk through the conference phone while we work through the slideshow.
Okay.
So the number for that is 785-890-4520.
Okay. So that 785. Go ahead. 785.
890-4520.
Okay, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to, I'll mute myself and then call you on my cell. How's that?
Okay, we'll try that. That should work. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Or do we just want to get all their numbers and have a conference call with all of them?
If it's still set up, we actually do have a conference line. I just don't remember all the settings for it. Because I don't think it's being used since we set it up.
You should be able to hear it.
Yeah.
I currently have their audio muted.
Hopefully she's not currently asking what the number is. Because we're not calling in yet.
Doesn't show any audio.
I mean, it shows it's on.
Last speech to me, there's a message.
I'm guessing maybe she got the number wrong or something.
890 795 890
Oh,
4520.
it's 785.
Yep,
Set,
785.
yep, 785 890 4520.
And when I call that number, it says call failed.
Well, I could call her. This number-
Yeah, we can. What's your cell? We can call you. Or Ken's got it. We'll call you.
Okay.
It's actually going to your office phone first.
Hello?
Hello.
There we go.
So that's the landline, not the cell, but that's okay.
Okay, will that work?
Yep.
Okay, 'cause
Well,
we can call yourself if we need to, but.
nope. That's why I still have a landline in the office.
Well, this is much clearer. This will be much better, I think.
Okay, perfect. Now, hopefully I can hear the question.
Yep, I'll make sure everybody speaks loud, and if I need to repeat it for them so you can hear, I will do that.
Okay.
So I guess if Bob wants to start over on the slide with if Goodland gets 100 new jobs, if he wants to start over on that slide, that might be a good place.
Okay, why don't I do that? He's here, but let me do it just to keep things simple, and then if you have questions for him, we can go from there.
Okay.
Sometimes technology is wonderful, and sometimes it kicks you in the butt.
That is true.
Are we getting the slideshow going again?
Yep, the slideshow is up and ready to go.
Okay.
I didn't have it shared back. That's my bad.
Okay. Okay, Josh should have it shared back to you now.
Okay. So what I had Bob do was basically, in talking to Kent and Zach, I know there's some people in the community that think there are going to be a lot more jobs than this, but the assumption is Schooler added 40 jobs and tire recycling added 60 jobs. What would that really mean in terms of change in the community? So that's 100 jobs. So what Bob was saying is that currently the prime workers, in Goodland make up 54% of the local population, and each household provides 1.5 workers, each family household. Bob always wants me to say family household. So that means that if you got 100 new jobs, you would probably be looking at, give or take, 240 new residents. And that is based on a multiplier that Bob's researched for small towns like Goodland. So that basically means that for every new job that comes in, you're also going to have what are called indirect jobs. So that means, you'll have more people that are taking their cars to get fixed. You'll have more people buying groceries. If you go to the 500, and we ran the numbers, let's just say you had 500, then you're looking at more school kids, then you're looking at more teachers. So we thought that it would be a good rule of thumb for the commissioners to basically just think every time you get a new job, you're probably going to be adding, about, 1.3, is that right, Bob? 1.3 people in the community. So again,
Yeah, so you're saying that for each household, new household, I guess I'm trying to look at it here. So for 100 new jobs equals 240 new residents. I assume that's like husband, wives, children, all
Right.
kind of averaged out. And I guess trying to do the multiplier is that like, so for 100 new jobs, is that multiplier for actual jobs? Like 100 new jobs actually makes like 130 jobs because of the indirect increase in the other businesses from those people. Is that what that's saying?
Yeah, let me put Bob on.
Okay.
The multiplier takes into account locally created jobs because you have a job in a factory that is basically exporting its product. If, for example, were to have 500 jobs that I ran the number, it would be about 330 kids, which would mean the school system would need about 22 more employees, and that's fit into the multiplier.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes, it does.
And like if you have 500 jobs, you'd have roughly 82 new automobiles bought each year. You'd have for 100 households, you'd have 188 new cars in the community that would require service. Those sorts of things.
Yep. Yep. Thank you.
Okay, next slide. So I shared with Ken that about 20 years ago, I gotta turn this off because now I'm listening to myself. How do I do that? So, about 20 years ago, with a number of other people, we wrote a book for the governor's office and most of the, state level Department of Transportation, air quality planning, but it was called Managing Change. And so I thought that I would just pull three things from that sort of how-to book. And again, I'm saying managing anticipated change because I know through the interviews that some of you thought, and again, sort of the same thing in Colorado, we're always boom and bust. So sometimes they think, we think all these jobs are coming and they don't show up. But I think generally, and I think what you're doing now is important, is, if you think you're going to get these jobs, even if it's only 100 jobs, you need to plan for it, and you need to understand the upside and the possible downside. The other thing that we said to people is know where you are at all times. You cannot manage what you cannot measure. So good information on a variety of attributes, economic, physical, social, and abilities to serve are going to be important. So again, Bob's example, one job roughly equals one new household. One job will generate another 0.3 to 0.5 jobs. And then, again, just looking at, during the interviews, I had one person tell me that there could be as many as 2,000 new jobs. I don't think that's going to happen overnight, but let's just say, for the sake of argument, that you got 500 new jobs. You're probably then looking, and Bob ran the numbers, at a population increase of 1,200, and that includes 330 children. The last point, and I think a couple of you pointed this out or made notes on your worksheets, is ensure flexibility. Successful communities design their policy and regulations with enough flexibility to respond to many possible future outcomes. So again, I think looking at the economic data that we've looked at, I think there's at least a 60% likelihood, probably higher, that you're going to get these new jobs. So again, I think it's important to sort of keep on top of it. And as you go
Next slide. So, what Bob did is, and he could do this quicker than anyone, is to basically, analyze, you know, what the likelihood is, based on your responses. So 100% of people said we need single-family homes. The next highest, answer was single-level homes for the aging population. And just a comment about that, so if homes were built for the aging population, that would free up new housing units for, the people that are moving in.
Yes.
Third thing, manufactured homes, if design standards are met. Fourth, mixed-use buildings, such as downtown apartments on the second floor. You all were in favor of 6 units stacked on top of each other apartments. Again, almost all of you, were in favor of accessory dwelling units, and those questions were not mutually exclusive, so some people didn't check, you know, this particular question, they checked others. 2 units with a common wall, and then tiny homes on wheels in a designated area. So I guess the question to the commissioners is, can we move forward, can the city move forward with initial code amendments to foster this type of development? What do you all think?
Thoughts? I know my opinion, this is Mary Thompson, is yes. I mean, I'm very interested in looking at all different types of housing that could be brought into the community personally. But
I agree. Yeah, I agree. This is Commissioner Howard. I agree, but the parking, like if you have the buildings on Main Street, which they used to have them all full of people anyway, the parking thing with families all have 2 or 3 vehicles, that's the only other problem with the downtown with the apartments up above the buildings.
Yes, and I think we have a solution for that that we've actually used in other small towns, and we'll get to that. But yeah, I mean, parking. I mean, currently your parking requirements are basically for almost every kind of residential dwelling. It's 2 spaces per dwelling unit, and it doesn't matter what kind of dwelling unit. So it is possible, and we can talk a little bit about this because it's further on in the PowerPoint, of how that might be accommodated. One thing that we've done, and we actually just did in Granby, Colorado, and they don't have a parking problem yet, but we changed their downtown zone district to allow developers or applicants that wanted to do something, to allow that parking to be provided within a specific linear distance from those units. So if there are other lots in the downtown area or property that's not being utilized to its fullest extent, if I wanted to develop one of those downtown apartments, I could provide that parking off-site. So that's just something to think about.
Great.
Other thoughts?
What do you guys think about the other couple things she has on there as far as the lot sizes? Or make it clear that accessory dwelling units are okay? Do you have a specific response on that or any comments on that?
Are you wanting opinions on lot sizes and things at this point, or just in the type of dwelling?
We could get to that because I have questions on the lot sizes.
Okay.
The one thing that I'm curious about, and maybe some of you were around in 2000, 2001, does anyone know why the lot sizes were increased in your R1 zone district? So it went from 7,000 to 8,400, which is just a big lot.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure, and I'm not sure anybody else here really knows for sure why that was changed at that point in time. It does seem like a very strange, 8,400 just seems like a strange number to come to for a lot size, but.
Well, and what's even more confusing is if my lot was platted and existed before 2001, which most of them were, then I'm okay to have a 7,000 square foot lot. In my mind, if you want to remove barriers to housing, you've got to make it simple and straightforward.
Yeah.
So that would be our suggestion but let's keep going because I've got lots of more questions for you.
Okay.
Next slide. So this one was a little bit surprising to us. So the question was, who is in the most need of better housing? And the responses were, senior citizens, independent living, new workers, families with children, people who currently work here, and then students. Are you guys surprised by those results?
I mean, I think, in doing this, I know for me personally, I can't speak for anybody else, I suppose, but, in some of this, I'm kind of making my own generalizations and assumptions on the things that I personally have seen. And I don't 100% know that truly is the need of the community as a whole and not just, the things that I personally have seen. So, I mean, if everybody kind of did it in that same vein as to just kind of how our direct lives interact with things and what we see personally, I can't say I am surprised by the wide variety within those.
Okay, that's helpful.
If anybody else has any other thoughts, please speak up. But.
I guess I would say that I disagree a little bit with the senior citizen independent living finding there, only because, I think this community has had housing of that type, say for example Sparks and Handy Towers, that were specifically designed for that, and we're not able to fill it, and then they've had to convert it to low income or student housing. So we've had it and didn't need it. I don't know necessarily that I agree with the assessment that we need more, but I've been wrong in the past. I could be wrong again. I don't know.
Well, I guess to tap off that, I was kind of thinking, when I answered that question, I was thinking if senior citizens had a smaller home to go to, then their bigger home would be available for other families to purchase. So, like maybe like a one-level house, something 2 bedrooms, something, just something that would fit them, their need. I know when I answered, that's what I was thinking.
And so many people mentioned during the interviews that there's a big issue in Goodland during the interviews of no one wants to take care of these big yards anymore.
Right.
So yard maintenance continued to come up as an issue.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of big yards, and I think, for the most part, I see most people, at least keeping things mowed down. There definitely are our fair share of eyesore yards that don't get taken care of by the owners, but
That's every community.
yeah, I don't think that's different than many other communities in the area.
Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So the third question was about accessory dwelling units and duplexes. And just an observation from Community Matters, what's fascinating to us is that both your R1 and your R2 zone districts allow duplexes, but you don't have very many. And the other thing that I think should sort of be put on the table, and I think I noted it somewhere, is that in the R2, which was really a zone district that was developed for multifamily, you only have right now in town 11 occupied multifamily homes in town. Is that right, Zach? It's 11. There are 13 altogether, and 11 are occupied.
Correct.
Yep. So based on the results on the ADU question, what you all said is it's okay for ADU should be allowed as an accessory structure so long as it is not bigger than the single family home. Everybody was in favor of, well, everybody, 89% of the commissioners, that ADUs, including tiny homes that are moved onto a lot but set on a permanent foundation, should be allowed. And then the third thing was reduce lot size and lot width to encourage more duplexes. So again, if you go to a small, right now, and we, Zach, you want to explain why it's difficult for people to build a duplex in either zone district? Because what's happening is they have to come in for variances.
So currently to build a duplex, it has to be a minimum lot size of 9,000 square feet, and that's 4,500 square feet per dwelling, which a lot of lots do not meet that.
Yeah.
And it's, I think 9,000 also for multifamily to do like a triplex or a fourplex, but you have to have 3,000 minimum square feet per unit.
Yeah, so again, the numbers are just really big. And I think, Ken, you were gonna send me, because we've done it on our end, you know, we were using your GIS database to basically try and understand the size of these lots. But is everyone in favor of reducing because this is an easy thing to do. Can we go back to the pre-2001 lot size of 7,000 square feet? Does that make sense to the commissioners?
I guess my biggest question on that would be on how would that affect a lot of the infill lots that we have in the community that are already larger sizes? How do we cut those down to smaller lots and not have like a sliver left over, or you know, how do we make it all fit?
So these are just minimums. You could still have a bigger lot. This would just make it easier to build something on a smaller lot. And if you want bigger, you can obviously have bigger.
Sure. So won't necessarily change actual lot sizes. It's just going to allow more things to be built within the spaces we already have.
Correct.
Okay.
And I think then and again, what I don't understand in your code is you have an exception in your R1 that says if the lot was platted pre, 2000 or 2001, then you can still have a 7,000 square foot lot. Well, there hasn't been a lot of development in Goodland.
I'll say I'm going to assume that's the majority of the lots in town.
So it's sort of it's in my mind, it's just a regulation that's making it difficult for people to understand what they can do. I think the bigger question is anyone in favor
don't know Kansas as well as I know Colorado, but, you know, in the Denver area, Denver, including Denver, most of the lots, you know, the old parts of these communities were 6,000 square feet. And is that too small? Or is that a size that should be an even smaller, that might be for a part of town that you want to redevelop?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just looking at the lot sizes we currently have, the way everything's platted, what would the benefits be for us to go even smaller than 7,000 if we went 6,000 or whatever? What?
I think that creates a big challenge for us in the way it's currently platted, because all you can do is reduce your width. So 7,000 square feet is 50 by 140.
Which is two lots.
Which would be two lots,
basically, the way
yeah.
it's platted.
Two platted lots, yeah.
So, yeah, you start thinking about getting down to something less than that, and then setbacks become an issue. You just can't physically build something that makes sense on that.
Like these tiny homes.
If you went down to the old, lot size, you would probably also then want to reduce the lot width and then relook at the setbacks. Because I think if you look at particularly the older homes, they were built with smaller setbacks. Is that an accurate statement in your mind, Zach?
Yeah.
Yeah. So somehow, for some reason, the code got updated, but the code doesn't really reflect what's on the ground. And so if you want to remove barriers to housing, particularly if you want infill, you know, in these existing R1, R2 zone districts, if you lower the lot size and also adjust the lot width in some of these setbacks, then I think you're going to be okay. But I do think the other thing, and we'll get to it a little bit later, you know, one of the things that happens in communities where you haven't had change for a long period of time, you have a set of land use regulations that really haven't been exercised. So they haven't been tested, because if I look at, you know, the building permits over the last 40 years, there hasn't been a lot of building. And some of the building has been, you know, more of the, you know, higher, moderate, larger homes, but there hasn't been a lot of infill. And how do you all feel about it if you've got an empty lot next to you, or you have an extra large lot? How would you feel if, let's say, I owned one of those lots, and what would happen if I split it and then built a second unit? Would that be okay?
Yeah. I mean, I know for me personally, I would not have an issue with that. In fact, I really wish somebody would tear down the house next to me right now and build 2 different units on the lot next to me. But, you know, I do know, you know, that's one thing that people tend to you have a lot of, you know, not in my backyard kind of an attitude when it comes to, you know, their residential area. We get kind of possessive of how we feel our neighborhood should look. And sometimes that change initially can be difficult, but I feel like once, you know, the change happens and you get used to it, I don't imagine most people would have an issue once they get past an initial shock if it's not something they're used to. But.
How do the rest of you feel?
What was that?
I said I'd be game.
I got. Seems to be.
I think the biggest controversy will be if you change the setbacks so things are gonna get closer, that's where people are gonna get touchy. You know, I don't want a house 10 feet feet off mine, that sort of thing, pick your number, but, excuse me, otherwise, I think it's a great idea that, or a great way to infill some of these, all these empty lots where an old house has been taken down. We need to encourage somebody to build something reasonable back in there. And I just think this makes it easier if you clean this all up and it's said one thing without exceptions and all sorts of things.
Just plain and simple, 7,000 square foot lot, perfect.
Yeah, go for it. You don't need a variance, go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, seems to be majority positive,
Good.
I'm gathering from the group here.
We're just warming you up here because the questions will get harder. So next slide. So, with respect to the ADUs, what I find fascinating is that you have a lot of existing ADUs in town, even though if you exercised your code, I'm not sure how you could build those. So, you've got the attached ADU above the garage on the upper left, and then the middle picture, and I'm sure you guys know where this is. So you've got a small home, and then in the back, which is the bottom picture, you've got 2 units that are ADUs. And then you've got these vacant lots here. The upper lot in the right-hand corner, you could do probably 2 duplexes on that lot, and the bottom infill lot, you could probably do a single family with an ADU. You might be able to do a duplex. I think what we learned, and I had this picture in the presentation that Zach and Kent gave all of you. We were called into the city of Englewood, and they had decided that they wanted to allow ADUs throughout the city. Well, one neighborhood, and it was the neighborhood right next to the Swedish Hospital, had what was called a neighborhood preservation overlay district. And they were up in arms because they didn't want ADUs. Well, when I looked at the regulations, walked the neighborhood, what was happening is people were tearing down these cherished old homes, and because of the way the dimensional requirements worked, they could build a duplex. And so the question to this neighborhood, would you rather have a duplex, which you can have now, or do you want to preserve the character and just allow an ADU? So in my mind, I think what I learned in working with that community is when you have a district like your R1, that's single family and duplex, why would you not want an ADU? Comments?
I mean, I think I agree with that sentiment. I mean, anytime, if the structure is in good enough shape to be able to keep, and it's in decent shape, I think we're better off to be able to keep a structure and build on the lot than tear it down to build new. There's always exceptions to the rule, but generally speaking, I agree with that. I'm seeing a lot of head shaking yes around.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Good. Okay. Next slide.
You wait too.
So, multifamily housing is, you want to go back one? Is that the next one?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, we're here.
Okay. So what's interesting is you do have some multifamily in Goodland, not sort of the multifamily in terms of apartments, but on the left you have, and some of you may know where this is because it's quite close to where you are
Just
right now.
look out the window. It wasn't dark. We could see it.
So you've got the house that was converted into 3 units, and then behind that, you've got an ADU in the back with an additional 2 units. So right across from City Hall, you've got 5 units on one lot. And again, obviously, this is a historic residence, so this was done, and I talked to Ken about that. You know, it looks like that back building, again, has been there for quite some time. Does anyone know how long that building has been there?
Not sure.
No idea. The house has probably been there since 1907 or 8.
Yep. Okay, next slide. So in terms of the question on multifamily housing, a majority of you felt that multifamily housing should be a priority for the city. And a majority felt that an area within the city that has 3 or more acres should be rezoned to allow multifamily housing. And then the last question, I was sort of interested that this got as many votes as it did. Any request for PD zoning or planned unit development zoning should include a mix of uses, including multifamily housing. You don't have any planned developments anywhere in town that we know of. Does anyone know if a PD was ever approved?
No clue.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure there's nothing now. I don't know if historically anything's ever been done, but.
Yeah. So just a sidebar comment on this, you know, for a community, for any community, planned unit developments are sort of a heavy lift. And some communities that we've worked with on their codes have set a minimum acreage, because if you do a PUD, you sort of need to bring a team of folks, you know, architects, you know, landscape, you know, you gotta bring everybody to the table, the engineering, and given the likelihood that you're gonna need this sooner rather than later, it would be something that if you did change your code, you might wanna look at setting a minimum acreage so you don't have little pieces that are sort of gobbled up and then look different than everything else in the community. So, but, again, I think it's something that people are in favor of. The picture on the left is actually, I can't remember where in Kansas that is, but it's a modular build. And again, one of the things that we learned in talking to all of you is that, you know, you don't have a lot of tradespeople, and so looking at manufactured or modular homes may make some sense because, you know, you still need the tradespeople, but the actual building is occurring off-site and then is brought onto the site, and so it could save some time, and might be, you know, modular and manufactured now, the design has come so far in the last 40 years, it's pretty remarkable what you can do, and it often doesn't look any different than stick-built. So the question for all of you, and I'll ask it again, are the commissioners interested in rezoning property for multifamily housing? In other words, would you like to be proactive and initiate like the rezoning? And let's take the property in the northwest corner that wasn't platted all that long ago, is platted for single family, but it sort of has sat there for a long time. Would the city be willing to rezone that for multifamily, or should the city open to requests.
Guess my initial thought on that is, I think I'm more the mindset to be open to requests than to rezoning a whole area for multifamily housing. Not that there won't necessarily be a need for multifamily housing, but I don't know that, at least in the short term, I know that we're looking at hopefully a bunch of jobs coming in soon. I just worry about the ability to fill and keep filled a large multifamily type of a place if we, just zone one area specifically for that. I'd be more open to the idea if somebody wanted to build a unit of 3, 4, 5, whatever many units within it, that they would do a request to do so on, whether it be, we decide we want to do a 3-acre area or, whatever area size we decide we want it to be, that they make the request in that way.
I kind of think the same way, Aaron. I'm not sure that just making a change to multifamily triggers anything. Just because you say it is, doesn't mean it's gonna, all of a sudden that'll spark an interest. But if somebody wants to come in, why not? Just, as long as they can meet some requirements that we can figure out, go for it.
Yeah, I think we'd want to try to make it as simple as possible if they wanted to do it, and it's not a big, huge ordeal. Like if they want to make it, they have this size of slot size that fits our needs, our requests, and then they can go for it. But
So one of the things you could do, and I think it's on the next slide. So I think and I've got the options laid out. So we'll get to that slide and sort of talk about what your options are to encourage multifamily housing. But I agree with you. If both the Planning Commission, the City Commission, all of a sudden rezone property, you're likely to get a lot of political flack, and you don't need it.
we got broad shoulders, we can handle it.
So the photo is of existing lots, and so you've got an area of the city where infill could happen, and it could be a lot of infill. And then you've got West 19th, and then Zach took this picture for me of another large empty lot that could be split into 2 lots or could fit some sort of townhome development. So, the good news is I think you've got property in the city that if the barriers to housing and the rules are simpler, then I think it may encourage investment when those jobs come. Next slide. So, in terms of manufactured and modular housing, people were very positive about that. What I thought was interesting with the results is, over 3/4 of you felt that rezoning large vacant parcels to a new residential zone district for smaller manufactured and modular homes of 3,000 square feet was worth pursuing. And then the second is change zoning regulations to clarify that manufactured homes must be allowed if they meet the established design standards. Now, I do want to tell you that you do have design standards for manufactured homes. The problem is those design standards are located in the definitions, which most people reading a code would not read the definitions to understand what those design standards were. The design standards are also pretty ancient in that it specifies that the manufactured home has to be a double wide. Well, we've come and I get why they put that in there, because in the old days you didn't want, you know, a single wide. But the industry has moved so far that specifying double wide would negate a whole bunch of really lovely, you know, manufactured modular homes that would fit anywhere in town. So I think that's just a change that would be pretty easy to make. The other thing that came up, changed lot size in the manufactured home parks to allow temporary housing units on wheels. We did a quick estimate, again, using satellite imagery. You know, you've got some vacancies in these manufactured home parks. And if you reduced, well, one, the lot size you have now, you have two numbers, and the numbers are in conflict. But again, they're large lots for manufactured homes, and so if you reduce those, or if the park owners wanted a space where you could put these tiny homes, people felt pretty good about that. And the other thing that's surprising is people felt pretty good about the use of intermodal shipping containers as housing. And you're seeing a lot more of that, and you're seeing a lot more of that on the east side of Kansas. So the question, and this is there's sort of three questions here. So again, should the city be proactive and rezone a selected area of the city for small lots that could also be used for senior one-level housing as well as more affordable units?
I have a question. So if we do something like that, does that depreciate the existing homes that are in that block or in that neighborhood? Like if you put a tiny home next to a multifamily home, does that affect the value of that person's home?
Yes, I would say it would. Because I think, again, the purpose of zoning is to get like-sized things in particular areas. Now there's some, you know, crazy planners that say, well, anything goes, but I think that, you know, if you wanted, I think that if you wanted to go to a 3,000 square foot lot size, one, the more I thought about this and reviewed your answers, whatever you do, I don't think, let's go to the next slide, because I think, so we'll stay there. So the second option, let's go through the option, is that the city, so somehow the city needs to let developers know, or even people in town that wanted to get into the development, you know, you somehow need to let people know that you're open to smaller lot development, and that would be some sort of concise housing strategy plan, where you would show areas for new development and infill. So again, it's more of an educational, development-friendly piece that you would put together to say, hey, we're growing and we're open to X, Y, Z. Go to the next slide. Guess the third. So again, I just wanted to, so the two pictures on so Cheyenne County, and actually the town of Kit Carson, has used this builder of modular homes out of Buena Vista. That's what their homes there, is rather than the city actually rezoning the property, you could create a zone district in your code, even though no property was zoned that basically says, okay, we have this new zone district called small lots. And you would write up the zone district, you would enact the legislation, but you wouldn't necessarily have to rezone a piece of property. So if I wanted to do small lot development, I would know that the regulation was on the books, but I wouldn't necessarily, then I would choose where I might want to do that development, and I, as the developer, would have to go through that process.
So that one would, so that last one would basically, you know, allow a district for the smaller lots that a developer could come and say, hey, I have this area here in the city or on the edge of the city that I would like to develop with tiny homes or whatever. And they would basically have to go through a process where we or the, you know, the planning commission or whoever could look at that particular lot and determine if we feel like that's appropriate within that residential neighborhood or wherever it is to be used as that district. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. So that's another door. So in other words, you know, I would think, just based on what you've said, that the city doing the rezoning is likely you're not going to be very popular. But if you created a district, whether it was a district, you know, for small lots, a new mixed-use district, but you would put it on the books, and then I, as a developer looking at doing something in Goodland, could then decide, oh, they have this regulation, I want to do small lot development, I want to do, let's say single level, you know, like independent living, you know, for seniors. And they would be in a small lot, and I wouldn't have to make the pitch or go through the planned unit development process. There would be a zone that I could grab and develop from there. So those are sort of the three options. So it sounded like option one, the city rezones, not a good idea. Second option would be creating some sort of, you know, we're open for business and we're open to different types of housing to meet our growing needs. And the third is, here's a zone district that you can use, but you have to go through the rezoning. And so that's all the public hearings, it's all the neighborhood input, et cetera.
Option 3 feels like the city could take some action without being too political on anything and leave it open. Option 1 feels pretty heavy-handed to me. Option 2 feels like, well, you figure it out and then come to us, but option 3 feels like us being proactive, saying we could set this framework up and put some groundwork down, but we're not gonna do all the work for you. Then you bring your ideas, so it's kind of feels like middle ground to me.
Go back to the last slide real quick, Josh. Just want to look at those again real quick.
I mean, is there a way that, like, option 2, to me, you know, to me, option 2 and option 3 kind of the same thing in the sense that you add the education to the option 3. And, you know, it would go beyond that and, you know, hey, we're open to this. Not only are we open to this, but we have districts that we've established where you can already do this, bring us your ideas and plans. To me, 2 and 3 is almost like one half
makes sense. I mean, if you're, I mean, I think it would behoove you, you know, so many of you may have known that Schooler, I guess, hired this group called Housing Growth Partners. And I have had a lengthy 1.5-hour discussion with the two guys that came out. When did they come out? Last fall?
Yeah, it was October, November timeframe, I think.
Yeah. So I had a lengthy discussion with them, and they are so they are primarily a modular housing group. I don't know, Julissa doesn't know, Kent doesn't know exactly what Schooler asked them to do, and I couldn't get it out of them. So, but they have been hired, they're not moving quickly. I've been trying to keep them in the loop, just letting them know that, you know, the city is open for business, and is interested in both infill housing and new housing. So I mean, option 2 would not, I don't even think you have to go through a housing strategy plan. I think it could be something as simple, you know, as some sort of, you know, brochure or something that you would prepare for anyone that was interested. We did something similar in the city of Walsenburg because they were desperate for development. And so instead of doing a comprehensive plan, which is really expensive, we did a strategic plan and basically, you know, looked at utility service, you know, where people wanted the community to grow, and came up with 5 growth areas. And I can send that to Kent, and he can share that with you. But the idea was, you know, that there would be something that if someone came to City Hall, and again, not a lot of staff, you know, they very similar staffing to what you have, that there was something that the city clerk could hand out when people came to the counter and were asking, you know, because people come into communities when they're about to grow, and they're oftentimes clueless. They don't know where to look. They know they want to do something, and they sort of dive in, you know, without great information. So that would be a way, if you did 2 and 3, and you can say, well, we have these new zone districts that are available to do this kind of stuff should you go through that process. You know, again, if you were a bigger city, and you had more professionals in the development sort of industry, then I'd say you wouldn't need to do that because you have your PUD process. But I don't know, Kemp, what do you think about the PUD process? Is that something that people would be interested in? Because that's the other way to go. Is to clean up your PUD and make it for a minimum size and push people that way.
I don't really know what the answer would be for this community regarding PUD, because there doesn't ever seem to be enough building at one time to justify a PUD. You know, it's done one block at a time, or more than likely 1 or 2 houses at a time. That doesn't justify a PUD. But if we would end up with a large enough set of homes together that would justify a PUD, just like when you ask the question, does anybody know if a planned development has ever been done in Goodland? The answer is basically no. that it would be a new process and they, I don't know what the action would be to it.
Yeah, and I think it's a really heavy lift for a community that hasn't had any development. I mean, there was a time, at least in a lot of the smaller towns in Colorado, where I was working with town managers, and all they wanted were PUDs. I mean, that's how Granby ended up being 64% PUD. But again, you're right, Ken. Those were big developers doing big projects, and so the way to think about a PUD, commissioners, is a PUD is a negotiated zone district. So you're basically reaching agreement between me, the developer, and you, the commissioners, both planning commission and city commissioner. This is what I want to do, and it's a lengthy process to negotiate with the developer, because oftentimes the developer doesn't necessarily want what's best for the community. And PUDs always come with a requirement, which is set at in your state statutes, of having open space. So parks, spaces where kids can play, whatever. So that's helpful. So I'm hearing option 2 combined with option 3. Is that where we're at?
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of where we are. I mean, I'm a little torn. I like the idea, but I also, I don't want it to be a complicated enough process that is going to turn people away. And I also wonder a little bit, with option 3, it is nice to have, a little more say as to where these different types of developments can happen, but at the same time, the members of these boards change, and the ideals of the people of the boards changes over time, and and what we may feel is appropriate now, in 5 years, there may be a whole group of different people with a whole different mindset who may look at it a whole different way. So it makes a little more complicated in my mind anyway, because I want to make sure we set things in a way where it can work well for everybody for a long period of time,
Other comments?
I'd just say I understand that. I think it's important to try and do your best, but we also have to solve for right now. And I think that's why we're here. We have to solve for something right now. And in the future, they'll do the same thing for their time. And that's really what we have to do.
Feels like the consensus is kind of a combination of 2 and 3.
Okay. Let's move on to the next slide.
Yeah, one more. I'll take you back one. There you go.
So on housing affordability, I don't want to say these were trick questions, but I did have to ask. So I think everybody is in agreement to utilize the resources you have at the state on your part, because I think, that if you ended up, if I wanted to develop in Goodland, and the, you know, the numbers are pretty tight to do anything, which is why going to a smaller lot size makes sense, because these large lots, you know, and larger homes, they're just expensive to build. But if you ask me to, I don't care how many jobs were coming into the community, if you ask me to then, you know, create a certain percentage of the units that were affordable, you know, I wouldn't build. I mean, you're trying to encourage people to build, and so I think you're right in that requirement would probably turn people away quite quickly. So I really liked your answers to this question. Kent, are you guys doing anything with the Kansas Housing Resources Corporation or the Neighborhood Revitalization Plan?
Well, the Neighborhood Revitalization Plan, we've participated, actually the county, the city, and the school district participate in the Neighborhood Revitalization Plan, and it has been reauthorized 2 or 3 times over the last half dozen to dozen years. And so that, we participate in that. We have submitted an application, well, actually Sherman County Community Development has, but the city has participated in that process, and the county, for a moderate income housing grant through, I think it's either through the Department of Commerce or Kansas Housing Resources Corporation. But we've submitted, and now it's the 3rd time submitted, and we just haven't been selected. So keep trying through that route, but that's really only regarding 2 or 3 lots as far as the moderate income housing grant. So it's not a widespread type thing.
Yep. So, okay, let's move on. Next slide. So, you know, the last question was, are there other changes to the city's current land development regulations? So generally, when you threw staff in there, the concept of creating a new mixed-use zone district was favorable. The other thing, and again, these are small changes that I found make a huge difference. So you could amend your subdivision regulations to so let's just say that that you could then combine lots administratively. So if there are no public improvements needed, if I own 2 lots next to each other, I could either move the lot line administratively, or I could combine the lots into 1 lot. So that was favorable. The third thing, and again, I think staff is probably Zach, because he knows what this means. So you do have in your code a lot split regulation, but the regulation isn't workable, so there's no way to do a lot split and make 2 separate lots because your lot size is too big. So if you lower the lot size, then we can get to a regulation that again would allow someone to split a lot into 2 lots. And again, that starts making things more affordable, because you're not going to get affordable housing with 8,400 square foot lots. I mean, 8,400 square foot lots are like estate lots. So, and then clear, is that basically you would just take all of your land that is owned by the government, you know, owned by the school district, but is in public use, and instead of it being, you know, R1, R2, industrial or whatever, it would just be zoned P for public. And that also, if I were looking for a home and looked at your zoning map, it's a really quick way for me as somebody moving in to understand, oh, this is where the schools are, these are where the parks are, et cetera. So a couple questions for you. One easy thing to do, and I've talked to staff about this, is should the city change the name of the C2 zone district to downtown mixed use? Because that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, both in Kansas and in Colorado, probably other parts of the country, the early zone districts had names like R1, R2, C2, C1, and it doesn't mean anything to people. So sometimes just changing the name so you understand what it is, is again, it's removing a barrier, it's helping people understand your regulations. So what do you think about that?
Makes good sense.
Yeah, it seems like a pretty easy way to just kind of clarify exactly what it is a little bit.
Yep, yep.
It sounds so modern.
Yeah.
So then back to the question about the parking requirements. So again, I think it's going to be difficult if I came in to rehab those apartments, you know, above the Main Street businesses, if I have to provide 2 parking spaces. Because where am I going to find 2 parking spaces?
Yeah.
So and the other thing is, sometimes with mixed-use buildings, there's what we call joint use. So it's the same person using, you know, you're not creating more demand for parking. What I don't want to see happen is, I don't want to see the upstairs apartments using your on-street parking, except if it was overnight after the business is closed. But we could reduce the parking requirements as we talked about. So instead of 2, we could go, depending on the unit size, to 1, 1.5. And what do you think then about allowing me, if I were to rehab some of those downtown apartments, allowing me to create parking spaces that were not directly next to those apartments?
I can say, as a business owner, former business owner downtown, that had apartments upstairs, that would have solved a lot of problems for our business to have those less parking requirements for upstairs, and also to have a regulation that apartment dwellers can't use those parking lots during business, or parking spaces in front of like a restaurant or whatever, a retail place during business hours. That would have solved a lot of problems. And also thinking in terms of my own experience, I have lived in a lot of places. I'm not a Goodland native. I came from a large metropolitan area, and it's very, very common from where I'm from, where you go into an apartment complex or even a duplex or whatever, and you have to walk a half a block to get to your place. You know, and if it's a really nice place and you have carports, you've got these huge carports with a bunch of parking spaces, and you're assigned to them, and you have to walk across a big parking lot to get to your front door. And I think especially if we're going to have more people coming in from larger metropolitan areas, they're used to that anyway, and I don't think that would necessarily be a barrier. And, you know, just the word around town with people I talk to, they really just want a nice place to live, especially if it's renting. You know, it's this, standards is the wrong word, but expectations, I guess, are a little lowered if you're living in a rented spot and it's affordable. There, you know, there's that give and take, and I think people are a lot more open to that than we'd like to think. I mean, for us.
That makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I don't know, I'm also like in favor of the idea of reducing the parking requirements. I do wonder a little bit about, you know, the departments on Main Street. You know, there isn't, where would we designate those people to be able to park? You know, there isn't just a lot of, I mean, you can park on the side streets. I mean, short of just, you know, writing the code where they just can't park on Main Street and have to find side street parking or something along that line. There just isn't the space for like the building owners to be able to designate an area of their own that's where those people would park.
Are there any vacant lots close to?
There's a right behind.
There's a
Yeah.
couple.
The old grocery store's parking lot.
I mean, there is some space that's, you know, privately owned by other individuals. And, you know, whether or not those people would be interested in, you know, turning those into parking lots for apartment dwellers, I couldn't tell you for sure. But
And there's also the right over here, the art center, that parking lot back there is public. I know people park there
and yeah, the people who live in the apartments on Main, a lot of those people park there already in that lot. Yeah. But
I mean, the other thing you can do, again, is certainly unfair. What we've done in some downtown areas is we have provided what's called an in lieu of parking fee. So you figure out what is the land value of a parking spot. And so parking spots are generally, when you add aisles or whatever, let's just use a round number, 200 square feet. I think your parking, the size of your parking spaces are 19 by 9. But let's just say 200, 10 by 20. That I could, if I wanted to say develop or rehab one of those apartments, instead of providing the parking, I could pay it an in lieu of fee that goes into a special fund in the city, and the city uses that money to then acquire land for parking in the downtown. Now, the one issue with that approach, since it's been instituted in a lot of places I've worked, is sometimes the city doesn't buy the land
don't know if it would be needed anywhere else.
I don't see the need.
Okay.
I don't even know, like, where you would do that.
Yeah, so I mean, so mixed use, kind of like downtown commercial type of mixed use, is that what we're talking, where people can just have small businesses in the residential area or
Right.
whatever? I mean, yeah, I mean, idealistically, I like the idea. You know, and I know, I mean, forever ago, I know there's smaller buildings or places that used to be buildings around town that used to be small grocery stores and things of that nature that have long since been tore down or turned into other garages. Or so I know that, I mean, that used to be more important to the day-to-day life of people. And I don't know if it's an idea that could kind of like further develop a small neighborhood amongst themselves that would encourage people to interact more with their neighborhood if there was some sort of small commercial business in that area. But again, I have a hard time right now thinking what that could be. I don't think that doesn't necessarily mean there isn't a good use for it though. So I think I would be in favor of the idea personally, but I don't know if anybody else agrees.
Not opposed to it, I just don't know like the initial look like use, but yeah, it's not for us to solve.
Well, I mean, I can think of something right off the top of my head. We have one of those uninhabitable little houses next to us, but I mean, we try to keep the outside painted and everything. I mean, but I could see in our neighborhood, it's close to downtown, making it like a little gathering place where you would have like a knitting shop, you know, a little knitting shop with classes, or a little like a place where you could rent for baby showers and have a little commercial kitchen in the back or whatever. I can think of all kinds of fun stuff you could do in a neighborhood with a cute building.
There's one possibility that actually is already sort of mixed use is right next to Shiraz, what the college did with the property. It's zoned commercial right now, but the hotel behind it is basically defunct at this point. It hasn't been formally defunct, but it's approaching that. But that hotel could be redone into residential, but then on the same lot you have a restaurant in front of it and you have residential next to it, but it's all one parcel. Yeah. So that's something, and it's really, when you talk about mixed use zone, then it's okay, is it a tool we would want to have in the bag? And that may be more like the previous question earlier about having the small residential zone. Do you want that tool in the bag as a possibility? Doesn't mean it could ever need to be approved for something. It'd have to be the right thing. But do you want the tool in the bag? And I guess that's an example of a possible mixed use zone that's not downtown that could end up.
I think there's probably plenty of, beauticians that get their license that would probably like to open a small shop in the back of their house that can't afford a residential building on Main Street, that would probably appreciate if we were able to rezone so they could do that.
And as we talk about it, there is already some of that kind of stuff out already.
What do you guys do, because the other way we could handle that, and just thinking off the top of my head, what do you do about home occupations now?
It's like one of those things in the code that's there, but we don't do a whole lot with it.
Yeah.
So I mean, again, in the old days, there were always rules about home occupations, and that home occupations couldn't be more than a certain percentage of your home. what would happen if we just loosened up the home occupation rules, again, making them more business friendly, and as long as there's no exterior indication of what the business is, you know, and you're not having 1,000 trucks in and out of your driveway, who cares?
That would be understandable, other than like more than your mechanic having a garage out back and running that garage and you have vehicles and all that. I could see your view working.
Yeah, so I mean, the types of businesses that have a lot of externalities, noise, smoke, fumes, whatever, they're not allowed, but pretty much everything else. The thing that always bugged me when they had a rule about home occupations only being a certain percentage of your home residence, who's going to check that? Zach, do you have time to go and enforce that rule?
Unless they want to
He
start
hasn't been
paying
enforcing
overtime.
that.
I mean, the IRS doesn't even enforce that rule anymore, so. Okay, good. So that's helpful. So then we talked about the subdivision regulations, and it sounds like just making clear that you can move a lot line or remove a lot line, consolidate lots, no public improvements, that everybody thought that was a good idea, correct?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay. So then the next slide, and given the time, I don't want to go through this, but this is, and I think Ken printed this all out or sent it to you guys.
Yeah.
So again, Bob Haywood basically just sorted all of the answers in terms of, you know, what was, you know, most popular. So, so again, I think that's sort of a nice way to sort of think about what you should move forward with the big additions being, so I think the single level homes for the aging population, the mixed use, making your design standard. So the one thing, just to let you all know, when you have design standards for manufactured or modular housing, those standards have to apply to everything in every single residential dwelling unit in that zone district.
Yeah.
And that's where your code now and the definition sort of says that, but then it throws in this double wide thing, and it's like, well, how can I meet that? So that's a little bit of a cleanup. I think everybody's in favor of reducing the lot size. We haven't talked about changing the lot. Well, we did changing the lot size in the manufactured home parks, and 2 units, and then go to the. So again, you guys could just. I think this is sort of a handy little cheat sheet for all of you to sort of see. This is sort of where we're at. This is where we want to go. So next slide is more of the same. And we talked about more of this. So then I want to do a recap of the, I want to talk about what would be helpful moving forward is what I call agreements in principle. So it's really being clear on where you guys might want to go. Now I do want to point out in these pictures, in the lower right-hand corner, this is lot that you take care of, but it's all under, you know, one ownership. So somebody takes care of that for you, but you do have, you know, some yard place, and then you've got like a community building, et cetera. So again, that's something that, I think would work, more so for, the senior housing, because then you're, you know, so these would likely be developed as condominiums, and then it's all under one maintenance.
Yeah.
So, let's go to the big questions. Next slide. Okay, so here are our options. So allow ADUs as an accessory use, create workable dimensional standards. So as an example now, you've got a 16-foot height limit for accessory structures. Well, if you want somebody to do an ADU, you could do a single level, but I think the dimensional standards need to be looked at. What we heard you say is the ADU must be smaller than the primary living room, and that anything that's put on a lot, even if it's a tiny home, has to be on a permanent foundation. All in agreement?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Okay. Second is reduce lot size. So go back to the R minimum lot size of 7,000 square feet. I think everybody was comfortable with that.
Yep.
Adjust setbacks so it's possible to build duplexes. So I heard you say you don't want skinny side yard setbacks. But do they need to be adjusted so that I could build a duplex?
What are the setbacks on? Yeah, we know it. Is it 7 foot, 14 foot? I don't remember.
12% with, or a minimum of 6 feet, depending on the size of the building.
And that,
Not less than 10% of the lot width and no less than 6 foot.
and that's to the end of the eve, right?
Yeah, first.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm just thinking,
My angst with that rule is that requires me to do a calculation.
It's a lot of math.
And wouldn't it be easier to just establish setbacks so that if I came to Goodland and I looked at that, I would know, okay, it's 12 feet instead of a percentage. Because that's how big do some of those setbacks get?
Haven't really had to do any with no houses being built.
But if you have a front lot width of 80 feet or 100 feet, then obviously you get the 10 foot on both sides. That's not wasting, but 20 feet total of the lot. And if you want that, that's fine, but to have that as the minimum gets to be an issue.
I guess what, in your experience, kind of minimum setbacks have you come across that seem to work okay?
So setbacks are always a little bit crazy because some communities allow certain things in setbacks and other communities don't allow things in setbacks. My rule on setbacks, particularly if you're two-story, is that setback better be wide enough so that I can get a ladder up to my second story to wash my windows. So I tend to take a very practical approach to setbacks. There are some municipalities where they don't allow window wells through all of these mathematical equations to figure out what can be done. So,
Capable.
Yeah, I do like your idea, because that was kind of one of the first things I was thinking of, as the structure gets taller, that the setback gets larger. One, that's also good for the neighbor, you know, because if you have the same, like say, 6 foot setback on a single story, and it's still 6 foot on a 2-story, that's gonna feel really close to the neighbor, you know, and it feels like it encroaches on your space, but whether it be like 6 foot for a single and 10 foot for a 2-story or whatever, you know, appropriate may be. I do like that idea of adjusting the size as you go up.
because you're dealing with the impact, and so you're exactly right. The impact of 2 stories next to me is very different than 1 story next to me.
Yeah.
And it simplifies the person building or whatever, my setback is this, I don't have to figure a percentage.
Right. Right. Yeah. So, consider an even smaller lot size, 6,000 square feet. And so the question then is, what is the need for a senior one-level unit? And I think the need for a senior one-level unit is probably, I think you could go as low as 3,000. Now, Ken, you were is it Felicity that had the list of lot sizes?
Yeah, we've completed a worksheet, and we need to do some mathematical calculations but we've done almost all the residential lots in town. It's about 1,700 as far as the lot size and a couple different things regarding it. So we can give you how many of our current lots are within this size category.
So maybe we use that to make an informed decision as to whether or not you could go smaller.
Yeah, because that's one thing I do worry about when, you know, as we go smaller, you know, just working with the available infill lots that we currently have in town. You know, you take, you know, a block that has, you know, 3 lots on it, and you know, and you cut them down so that, you know, 2 of them have 6,000 square feet, and then you're left with an oddball sized lot. You know, what do you do with that? You know, so I'd be more in favor of the idea of tying, you know, if we need to go even smaller, to be part of like the districting for tiny homes or whatever, make it something more along that lines. If somebody wanted to rezone an area smaller, then they would go through that process.
Okay.
But then don't we have to change the one requirement stating that you can only cover so much percentage of your lot size? We'd have to change that one too?
Yes.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. I mean, once you change the lot size, I mean, one, if we change the lot size, or we go back to your old lot size, and so we don't have this, but if you have a 7,000 square foot lot, it's like, no, 7,000 is the minimum. We can look at the dimensional standards, and Mike can help us with that. So Mike in our office is both a certified planner and he's also a licensed architect. And so Mike is just really good at looking at things, you know, like the rest of us have worked in lots of different places and say, okay, that would make sense. So,
Cause I know in the past in Goodland, there's been some little lots that were 35 feet wide that had a little tiny house on it. And people have bought them thinking they were able to put something else back on them, and they couldn't. But there was something there original.
Because of the lot coverage limit.
Uh-huh.
So we can look at the lot coverage because that's a big.
50% of the lot. And that includes all your accessory buildings also.
Now, do you have any, Zach, you may know this, or Ken, do you have any drainage issues
do have some drainage problems, but it's not due to impervious area.
Okay, okay. Okay. Okay, so we talked about reducing the lot size in the manufactured, home parks. I mean, again, I think that's I think that's an easy fix that may get you to, at least, so if I go into, I build a lot with manufactured home parks, in my career, God knows why, but I have. Can I do like a 3-month lease in a mobile home park, or does it have to be longer?
All of ours are privately owned, and they kind of either have homes on them that they rent out, or they do provide lot rent for the people, but I don't know what their terms are
Okay.
in length.
Because we just did Mike did and I should send it to you, Zach, sort of what it looks like in terms of availability in these manufactured home parks, and if they're, particularly if they're pad leases, I think the lot size requirement is 8,000 square feet, if I'm remembering, but that, or X number of units per acre, and those two numbers get you a different answer. So that's, again, an easy cleanup, because they're contradictory. But again, that would be an easy thing to do and may get you to at least having some homes. I know
Now
that,
it's 4,000 feet per home.
Is it 4,000? I was thinking it couldn't be much more than 3,000, just visualizing how close some of
You
the houses
can't
are.
have
yeah,
more than 8 in an acre, and you have to have a minimum area of 4,000 square feet for each space.
so you gotta get rid of that kind of arithmetic, because you get two different answers.
Yeah.
Which one do I go to? That's just simple code cleanup, that Zach will make your life easier. So we talked about the lot split rules. So again, I think that's an easy fix. If we reduce the lot size, so that's good. Next slide. So, create areas suitable for multifamily housing. It sounds to me, based on this discussion, that we could create a zone district, but that it would be up to me, developer, to come in and ask to rezone to that district. Is that it? And we would also let people sort of, we would have some sort of educational piece with it.
Yeah.
Yep, I believe that's the case.
Okay. So that's, okay, 4, create mixed-use districts. So, I think, cleaning up C2, so it's truly mixed-use downtown. And then I felt like sort of warm reception on new mixed-use district for other areas of town. Maybe what we could do there, I'm just, again, off the top of my head, I've done this for a long time. Maybe what we do is look at the C zones and allow, and was that you that we were talking about, like the little, knitting shop?
It was me.
That was Mary Ellen over here, but yeah, I mean, I think the idea of, you're talking about looking at the current types of businesses allowed within the current districts and finding ones that we feel would fit within the residential neighborhood.
In allowing that, or allowing them as a conditional use, so that they would have to go through a process whereby I would have to make an argument that all the impacts of that conditional use could be mitigated. That you haven't used that part of your code. Is that correct?
It's there, but like you said, has not been used.
Yep, okay. Okay, so I think we had consensus on reducing the number of parking spaces required, parking off-site, so I think we're good there. On B, let me talk, we'll figure out where we want to go in the mixed-use district for other areas. Maybe there's a tinier step we could take to begin to allow that to happen and sort of see what the appetite is.
Yeah, even if it is kind of rewording our current code to be a little more lenient on things that can be done, maybe.
Okay. Okay, next slide. Okay, so revised design standards for manufactured modular housing. So those requirements should move to all residential zone districts and probably also the mixed-use district. And then I think we've got to update the standards for the new types of manufactured modular homes. I fully appreciate why double wide was there, but I don't even know if they use that term anymore in the manufactured housing industry. So 6, recap of possible zone districts, multifamily, mixed use, small lot zone for sort of a mix of single family, single level minimum yard, and public land. So, again, developing the district is one thing, but I heard loud and clear the commissioners are not interested in actually selecting the property, which I think is wise.
Yep, I believe so.
Okay, I think there's one more slide. There are a couple more slides, but. Okay, so every time I look at the code, I've told Kent this, it's like, God, I see another thing that's just crazy. So one of the things that's crazy is currently, if I wanted to annex into the city, I would have to zone the property R1. That's a silly regulation. If under state statute, you've got to zone a property within a certain amount of time when it's annexed, and I think it needs to be clear that either the R1 is a holding zone or you allow me to zone it whatever I want. So one of the things that I think I'm discovering as we go through this is the current regulations don't reflect what is already built and what the commissioners want. And so, again, this is what happens, not your fault, in communities where you haven't had a lot of development, that you're just not using your code. And if you're not using your code, then you don't see the problems. But I think it behooves you to fix some of those problems, at least the easy ones. And so that means update the regulations to reflect priority building code?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that would probably be a good thing to do. I mean, it sounds exhausting.
It sounds like you're baffled by it, like. I think it's, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree, it's a good thing that probably needs to be done. It would be nice to do. I don't know if that, I mean, does that fall under the scope of what we're doing now?
No.
I don't think so, but, I mean, it is definitely something
And
we
the good
need to
news is
consider.
that we're a not-for-profit, so we've already blown the budget, but
Yeah.
that's okay, we're gonna
I mean,
Ken
it's,
probably knows that I sort of adopt communities, so I have adopted Goodland, so you're on my adopted community list, so, we've obviously done more than we were contracted to do, but I don't mind doing it, but C would be, that would be a different thing. Any other suggestions you might have? Particularly planning commissioners, because you sort of get to see some stuff that maybe the city commissioners don't get to delve into as much.
I don't know that anything comes to the top of my mind right now.
no, I mean, I'm getting a lot of blank stares. I mean, I feel like what we've gone through tonight is a lot of good progress, you know, it's a lot of, you know, the chance to be a lot of positive change, I think. And I don't know that we really need to delve much further beyond what we're currently doing. I think it's covering the ground that we want to cover.
I think you've set the foundation, Barb, to make certain changes. And then they want to see how to actually implement these changes. And then I think that next question would be better served at that time.
I agree. I think that's right. I just want you to know that every time I read the code. What do you mean there's a 16-foot height limit? What do you mean I have to annex in and zone R1? So, yeah, but
I mean, I kind of feel the same way every time I read something through the code too. I feel your pain.
Well, sometimes when the code doesn't fit what the community wants, then you sort of don't follow the code.
Yeah.
And I always say, you put the regulations on the books that you want, and if you don't want them on the books, you take them off. So that's simple. So.
Yeah.
So Kent, why don't you wrap up, or Mayor wrap up in terms of, I think the next slide is where we want to go from here.
Well, I believe, you know, you've kind of got a better handle on kind of what we're thinking. I know there was a lot of different information that kind of went different directions that came at you through all your surveys and everything. But I hope we kind of cleared that up for the most part for you. And I think we're just looking forward for you to kind of compiling everything and coming back and meeting with us with some good information to move forward with.
In person.
In person.
No more technology.
Yeah, no, we won't echo in person. At least I hope not.
Good. Okay, well, again, we appreciate all of your time and interest in this. I think it's important, and I think the more the city can do and I know Ken is trying, and I had a long discussion, maybe two, with Julissa, just trying to get, you know, I think the question always is, you know, are the jobs coming? I think they are. And again, if you can, the more you can find out about the timing and answer the how much question, I think it, you know, that helps. And obviously, you know, with any
I don't know that we really have any good information on that yet.
I know that they've hired new people, and
Yeah.
they're already in the community. There's a couple.
Well, they should be taking grain the fall of this year for canola.
Well, they're talking about having the squeeze plant start in October.
Yeah, so
What
if they're
I've heard.
expecting to actually start utilizing those
Crushing,
portions
yeah.
of the plant by the fall, then I would imagine fairly quickly they would wanna start moving on things, but.
Yeah, it was just interesting, and I will keep in contact with, Matt Darling and, Adam Hutnick, you know, the people they hired. And I think, you know, that kind of reaching across the table, you know, to people who could create the housing is also a big plus, just because they know, they know the city is on top of this, so I think we're good. Okay, well, I will visit with Kent and Zach, and we can figure out a date, to come back in person with, some, I guess, broad brush. I'll talk to Kent in terms of how far we can get, but with suggestions, so.
Okay.
Sounds good?
All right, well, I thank you, Barb, and Bob, if you're still there, thank you too for meeting with us this evening and kind of facilitating this meeting with us to keep us moving forward.
Perfect. Okay, you take care, stay warm.
Yeah, you too, have a good evening.
All right, thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, well, I thought that went pretty well. Yeah. You know,
A
I
lot of
think,
good suggestions.
yeah, you know, I think I just wanna add, you know, just in general, I know kind of one of the motivating pushers for this is, you know, the idea that there's possibility of lots of jobs and stuff moving into town, but I also think that just this kind of a refresh in the things that we're looking at doing is just good for the health of the community in general, even if you don't get a bunch of jobs in the town. You know, I think a lot of people who already live here would look forward to being able to have more options in the type of housing and stuff that they can build and live in. So I think it's just good for the overall health of the community, I think.
Yeah.
Anybody else have anything else they want to add?
When it comes to economic development, this might be the most important thing that these two groups together can do to make sure that continues to happen, so.
Yeah.
I think, you know, when this gets done and we're able to fix some of this stuff, I think this is gonna be one of the things these groups, are proud of.
We're talking about the code and stuff, so are we looking at like what kind of window we're looking at, maybe trying to get that corrected or adjusted or?
As far as the
What she's
specific
talking
things
about,
that we're talking about
yeah,
now, I
yeah.
guess, so
I
she'll,
mean, if we want somebody to come in and build and stuff, we gotta get that corrected first. I mean,
yeah.
I think the number of items and, you know, I think it will be presented to you as not all in one package, but it might be multiple ordinances to do. But, Barb asked that question, or her other folks in her office, and I basically said, the question was what kind of time frame are you thinking to get this accomplished?
Right.
And I said basically 3 to 6 months. Because it basically takes about a month and a half, even if we had it on the next meeting for planning commission and city commission, just because of the way the timings go, and because you have to publish and have so many days before in order to accomplish a change in the zoning ordinance. It takes 45 days at a minimum, 60 days. So I basically said 3 to 6 months. I think that's a good time frame. It doesn't mean that all of them, you guys, you've said yes so far. It doesn't mean when you actually look at it or you get enough information that you don't say no to one of the things in the future. It's not an absolute yes. It's
Or
not
to adjust it in some way.
Yeah, but I think that's a pretty good time frame to get a lot of this stuff implemented.
I think that fits probably with the timeline too, because if you look at start until April, May, you know, so.
Are you going to like prioritize,
That's what I was thinking.
you know, I mean, like, do we go for low hanging fruit first, or do we have a priority list of what would get rid of barriers the best today for what we're looking at?
I think it'll be more discussions Zach and I have with Barb, and then
Okay.
present it to you, and then let you guys tell us what's the low hanging fruit. That's an absolute yes, let's do that.
Mhm.
And then some of the little more complicated things, we wanna make sure one thing is make sure that it's changed in every part of the code where it says that. And don't leave something behind. That type of stuff takes a little time to make sure.
Well, I think the other thing she kind of mentioned is some of the terminology that we have in our existing code is outdated. Maybe we need to kind of get current with that, so it's understandable what we're.
Well, it's just like what we just did.
Exactly, right.
With the trailer park RV.
Right.
Trailer camp RV park thing,
Yeah.
you know.
That was pretty funny. She just kept laughing every time she said double wide. It was like, okay.
Well, I appreciate it's there.
Like, oh, okay, we must be out of date there.
And even though we've done this, there'll also have to be something to let the public know,
Right, exactly.
so they understand. And part of this to me is, okay, this is the building blocks. It's not somebody will build 40 homes because we did this. It's just, we're better, doesn't mean we're perfect. We're better able to respond when someone does want to do something.
Anything else? All right, well,
Go get your charger.
you guys wanna adjourn your meeting? And then we will adjourn ours.
Go ask for a motion to
Yeah.
adjourn the.
Entertain a motion to adjourn the planning commission meeting.
Make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. We're adjourned.
I will also entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
A motion by Commissioner Redland and a second by Commissioner Showalter. All in favor say aye.